Hi everyone, my name is Monique,
And I'm Naveen from Before You Play.
and today we're going to be showing you how to play a game that is currently on Kickstarter called Grendel, the Game of Crime and Mayhem.
Yes, this game is designed by Alara Cameron as well as Sen-Foong Lim and published by Off the Page Games, who are helping sponsor this video. Now, in this game, players are going to be taking on the roles of various characters from the comic book called Grendel, in which we're going to be battling it out for influence over New York City over the course of one whole night.
Yes, this is an asymmetric game for 2 to 4 players in which each player features a different mechanic on their turn. One player does bag building, another player has a rondelle. And so today, we're going to be giving you an overview of the 4 different characters, and we'll also be showing you how the game plays, just so you have an idea as to what to expect.
Now, if you are interested in this campaign, there's a link in the description which you can check out at your leisure. Lastly, if you like these kind of videos and you want to see more in the future, please consider subscribing.
And with that, we are ready to begin. So, if you please direct your attention to the center of the table, we're all set up here for a 4-player game of Grendel, the Game of Crime and Mayhem. Welcome to New York.
New York.
Now, for some of you, these characters may look a little familiar, but if not, this game is thematically based off of a comic book called Grendel.
Yes, of course, you have Grendel, who is the main character and assassin in this story.
Yes, Grendel, as well as his arch nemesis Argent, the police, as well as the mob, are going to participate in one night of mayhem. And so, over the course of the game, players will be vying for control over the various spaces amongst the 3 different zones. We have Manhattan, Brooklyn, as well as Queens. And the way in which we'll be doing that is we'll be moving around the board, we'll be punching each other's pieces in order to put out our own influence tokens, and we'll be adding our own player aggression pieces to the 3 different towers that correspond to the 3 different zones around the board. And each tower has a counterweight that is based off of player count, because as players add aggression tokens to the tower, it's going to get heavier. And as soon as this piece falls because of the weight, just like that, then it triggers one of 3 mayhem phases throughout the game, which eventually leads to scoring that corresponding zone. And we'll be doing this for each of the 3 different towers in the game. Now the thing is, all 4 characters are asymmetric in terms of their main turn mechanic as well as in how they score. As an example, Grendel here is playing a bag building game, whereas the police utilize a rondelle.
Yes.
And so we're just going to give you a brief overview as to how each character's turn works, just so you have an idea as to what to expect.
Sure.
So then, starting with Grendel, Grendel is an assassin who is trying to instill fear amongst the various zones in the city. At the end of each mayhem phase, Grendel scores points in each space of the corresponding zone that we're scoring that has one of his fear tokens, also known as his influence tokens.
So Grendel's main goal is to really spread out as much fear in the scoring zone as possible.
Right. Now, as Grendel, on your turn, you're going to draw 3 chits from the bag. And each chit will show one of 3 different symbols that correspond to the 3 tracks on Grendel's board. We have the Hunter Rose symbol, the Shock Fork, as well as Speed. After drawing your chits, you'll then assign each one of them one at a time to each of the 3 different tracks, but they do not have to match. They do, however, have to be placed from left to right. So as an example, I could assign this Hunter Rose symbol chit to the Shock Fork track if I wanted to. And then I'd get to immediately take the action that's below the chit, as well as all actions to the left of it. So as an example, if I were to place that there, I could then punch. And then let's just say I were to assign my Shock Fork next, and I do place it on this track. Then I get to do both of these actions in any order of my choosing. Now, the benefit to assigning a chit to its matching track is that each of these 3 tracks has their own bonus ability for doing so. As an example, if I were to have assigned the Hunter Rose to the Hunter Rose track, then I get to do its bonus ability here, which lets me add one of my aggression tokens to any of the 3 towers that haven't scored yet. And that's going to be the primary way in which I place my aggression tokens in there, which is going to be very important for the mayhem phase, as you'll see.
And if you're curious about these aggression tokens that we're talking about, they are going to be very important as they are currency when you go into the mayhem phase. And just so everybody knows, each player has a set of 1s, 2s, and 3s. And these have varying weights because, again, this is a tower contraption that, depending on the weight, will actually drop and trigger that mayhem phase.
Right. So as you can imagine, you're going to want to put these out as often as possible. Now, as for the different types of actions on Grendel's tracks, they're mainly going to be different combinations of being able to move around the board. So anytime you see the footstep symbols, that's going to be the number of adjacent spaces that any of the characters can move, really. Although, Grendel has a unique movement ability that allows him to freely move across adjacent fear tokens. So, as an example, if this were to look like this, and I were to have assigned my 2 chits to the speed track, then I can take this action, which allows me to move across spaces that have fear tokens. And unlike some of the other characters, Grendel just has one piece that represents him. So I could move 1, 2, and then because I get to resolve this action as well, I can then move 2 more spaces. And in this game, adjacency also includes these spaces that are connected via a bridge. Now, seeing as Grendel only has one representative piece, movement is going to be very important, because another type of action that all of the characters typically can do is the ability to attack other pieces. And that's going to be specifically the fist punch icons. But Grendel can only punch pieces that are in the same space as his piece.
So the fear tokens do not punch, only Grendel's piece does.
That's right. And unlike Grendel as well as Argent, the other 2 characters have 2 different types of pieces. They have a captain piece as well as grunts.
Yep.
Punching only allows Grendel to remove grunts. They are the weaker type of force, but whenever you punch them, they're actually removed from the board and replaced by a fear token. So this is one of the ways in which Grendel can get his fear tokens out.
A little aggressive.
Now, the thing about influence tokens, whether they are Grendel's or the Argent characters, is they're double-sided. One side is the regular side, and the other side is shielded. And so some actions will allow you to put out a shielded token. At some points in the game, you may be able to eliminate a captain, which would allow you to put out the shielded version of a fear token. And this is basically just a stronger version of your fear token that is harder to remove from the board.
Yeah, think of it this way. A fear token, there's a way to get rid of them. They'll typically have 1 damage point. A shielded one would basically have 2 damage points.
Yes, and speaking of getting rid of influence tokens, that is one of the types of actions on Grendel's track. This is the degrade action that you'll also see other characters take. Because punching only affects the wooden character pieces, in order to remove influence tokens, you would have to degrade them. If you degrade a regular influence token, it gets removed from the board. But if the influence token is shielded, then degrading it just flips it over to its non-shielded side. Right. So that is what I mean when I say it's a little bit more protected.
Yep.
And degrading other players' influence tokens also allows Grendel to put out a fear token. And that is all represented on your player board. So removing an influence token or a grunt gains you a fear token. And removing a player's captain piece gains you a shielded fear token. Now, like I was mentioning, during each of these scoring phases, Grendel scores points for each space in the scoring zone that has a fear token in it. But, as you can imagine, the Grendel player will need to space their fear tokens out. And so this action allows you to move fear tokens to adjacent spaces. Similarly, there's also the lure action, which allows you to move other players' pieces into adjacent spaces. And finally, the last type of action, which is the simplest of them all, is the ability to just draw a card from their corresponding deck. And so each of the 4 different characters has their own corresponding deck of cards. Now, these cards are going to allow them to do various things, such as various combinations of these different types of actions, but gaining these is all just set up for the Mayhem phase, because you can't actually use them until the Mayhem phase. And so as you can see, the more chits you place on a track, the more actions you get to do during that placement, because again, you get to take the action below the chit as well as everything to its left in any order of your choosing. Now, the last thing is each of the 4 characters has a way of upgrading their abilities. So with Grendel, each time you fill one of their 3 tracks with chits, meaning now the track has 4 chits in its space, just like this, and again, they do not have to be matching, that's just for the bonus. Then you get to upgrade 2 of these chits by choosing 2 from your upgrade stacks. Now, each of the different upgrade chits have all 3 symbols. The difference is the bonus that's in the middle. So you'll choose 2 of these, placing them into your bag, and then you'll choose 2 of the chits that are on the track to remove from the game. So you'll always have the same number of chits that are in your bag at any given time.
Yeah, and that's the bag building aspect for Grendel.
Yes. And you'll notice that a lot of the different actions that we went over for Grendel are going to be repeated amongst the other characters. So then, moving on to his arch nemesis, Argent, his goals are actually very similar to Grendel's. Not only is he also represented by just 1 player piece, this is Argent right here, but he also scores points by having one of his influence tokens in each space of the scoring zone. But instead of fear, they are called ambush. Now, unlike Grendel's bag building game, Argent is playing a push your luck game with his action cards. So the Argent player will have a deck of cards that have varying number of skull symbols at the bottom. Some of them have no skulls, and some of them have up to 2. And so on your turn, you'll be drawing cards from your action deck 1 at a time in order to try to avoid busting, which happens if you reach a total of 4 skulls. And so as an example, right now I only have a total of 2 skulls, and so I could choose to stop or I could choose to keep on going.
Yep.
And once per turn, I can choose to banish a card that I've flipped. So let's just say, for example, I were to flip this card and now I have busted because I have 4 skulls. I could instead banish this card and continue drawing. Now, as soon as I choose to stop, then I can use these action cards to take actions by either resolving the symbols on the cards themselves or by using them to take the basic actions that are on my board. In addition, if I don't bust, I can also take the bonus that's on my bonus token, which lets me add an aggression token to one of the 3 towers. But let's just say I do end up busting, then I would not be able to take this bonus, and I would have to discard cards down to a maximum of 3 skulls. But after doing so, I would still get to take actions with those cards. So you're never going to have a turn where you're not taking actions as Argent. Now, when taking actions, the Argent player can choose to resolve their cards in any order. But again, if they had banished a card that turn, then you cannot resolve the banished card. And most of the actions you'll find in his deck are going to work very similarly to the ones we discussed with Grendel. Some actions let him add aggression tokens to the various towers. He can also punch, but only in the same space as his piece, gaining him an ambush token in the space if he removed a grunt. Argent can also degrade influence tokens, as well as move his own influence tokens, and he can also move depending on the number of footsteps that are shown on the card. But his special unique movement ability allows him to spend 2 of those movement points to jump directly to a space that contains one of his ambush tokens. So just like how Grendel can freely move across adjacent fear tokens, Argent can just jump directly to his.
So that's by spending 2 of those foot symbols.
That's right. Now, instead of resolving the card action, the Argent board has 4 of these basic actions that are pre-printed. So you can choose to forgo the action of the card itself to place it on one of these spaces and take the action that's pre-printed on the board. However, the card that you place there will stay there until cards are removed from the player board, which happens when each Mayhem phase is triggered, so only 3 times throughout the game. And finally, just like how Grendel was able to upgrade his chits, Argent can upgrade his cards. And so anytime he resolves an action that allows him to trash an action card, he can trash an action card that he's already used or one from his discard pile, just not one from his player board, and choose one of the 3 upgraded action cards that are in his display, placing it on top of his draw deck. And so that is how the Argent player becomes stronger. And again, similar to Grendel, the Argent player also has their own deck of cards. So some abilities will allow him to draw from his deck of cards in order to prepare for the Mayhem phase.
Okay, now switching gears from Grendel and Argent, we have the police who are going to be playing a different style of game. They're going to be focusing on a rondel system here to take their actions. And unlike Grendel and Argent, they have different types of pieces. We have wagons, which basically allow you to have slots for jail, as well as grunts and captains. And with these pieces, what your goal is at the end of a Mayhem phase is to have more pieces than at least one other faction in a particular space. So if this was an area that was going to be scoring, they have 3 pieces to Grendel's just 1 piece, so they'd be scoring. Now, the way that the turn works is we have 2 squad cars that are on the outside of these wedges that are part of our rondel. And what you'll do is you're going to move one of these 2, but you will be moving both of them on your turn. So you get to move 1 squad car up to 2 empty or vacant spaces away, and you can leapfrog over a current squad car. So I can move this one here or here. Then you're going to take the depicted actions that are listed in the wedge, and that can be done in any order of your choosing. And they're going to be things like moving your captains. So anytime you see the black suit with the black tie, that is one of your captains that's on the board. This one right here, this is how you're going to go ahead and put out one of your aggression tokens into one of the towers. Some actions, such as this one, allow you to put out 1 captain and 2 grunts, and you can place them anywhere on the board where you have presence, and you can split them up as well.
And in this game, presence is just spaces where you have a piece. And so as an example, the police have presence in 3 different spaces on the board. Now, the difference between the 2 pieces is just that the captains are more difficult for the other players to get rid of.
Right.
But when it comes to scoring, they're all considered 1 piece each.
Correct. And when moving your captain, you can bring as many grunts as you'd like along with you. So with this action right here, being able to move my captain 2 spaces, I could bring these grunts here, 1, 2, across that bridge.
So that's a good way for you to be able to sort of spread out your pieces.
And of course, other actions allow you to draw cards from your unique deck. And the other type of action that you'll see depicted on your rondel is this symbol here. This allows you to place out one of your wagons onto the board where you have presence. So if you were to place this out, I can place it here. And what this does is it opens up another slot, and this represents one of your jail cells. Now, this is important because after you move your squad car and take all the designated actions, if you have the two squad cars adjacent to each other next to a handcuff symbol, you actually get to arrest one of the pieces on the board and place it into one of your jail cells. So in this case, had I moved the squad car here, took all these actions, I could arrest one of these grunts, for example, and place it into this jail cell here. As soon as you do that, you are allowed to place out one of your grunts onto the board where you have some presence. So maybe I'll place it here. And now that this jail cell is occupied, this particular action that you see depicted here is upgraded. And anytime you take this action on your rondel, you're actually going to get the sweeter version of it, which is putting out one captain and now 3 grunts instead. This one over here that I just opened up, instead of drawing 1 card, you actually get to draw 2 cards. Now the thing is, as soon as I arrest a second piece of the same faction, so let's just say I tried to arrest this captain from the mob, I can only house 1 piece of each different faction in all of my open jail cells. So I would place this one here, get the benefits that are depicted below, but I would have to release this mobster into a location where I have presence. So maybe something like that. So when playing as the police, you have to be very cautious about who you arrest at what time so that you can have the right upgrades at the right time. Now remember, as the police, you're going to be moving both of your squad cars. So you do that once and then you move the other car. And the way that you can upgrade your actions on your rondel, anytime you move a squad car past this line or this symbol here, you get to immediately place out one of these badge tokens inside one of the rondels. So let's say I place this here. Now, anytime you take actions here, not only do you get this action, but you also get the designated action that you've placed out.
So you're basically getting to customize the various wedges of your rondel.
And that is essentially how the police works. Now, there's a little bit more when you go into Mayhem, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And moving on to our very last faction, we have the mob, who also have grunts as well as captains. But they are playing a different game, as they are playing a dice allocation game with these different spots on their board. In order to score points during Mayhem, they want to have at least 2 pieces in a particular area. So right now, if the board looked like this, they are scoring here as well as here. However, they are not scoring here because they only have 1 piece.
So unlike the police, who wants to have more pieces than 1 faction in their space, the mob just wants to have 2 pieces.
Yeah, so if we were going to be scoring this queen's area, it would be in their best interest to look like that. Now, the way that the mob's turn works is on their turn, you're going to take the 4 dice and roll them, and you're going to allocate these dice to the various different sections of their player board. And of the 4, you will only actually deploy 3 of your 4 dice. Now, the first 2 places that you have here have a question mark symbol, meaning you can place any die face on there. So if you were to place on the recruit symbol over here, you get to draw 1 card from the mob deck, as well as place out 1 mob captain, as well as 4 grunts into a location where you have presence. And like the police, you can spread them out as well. Now, when placing a die on Run the Racket, you get to activate all the symbols that are depicted or exposed. So right now at the start of the game, you only have this symbol and this symbol, but as you upgrade and remove tokens, then you get to activate all the symbols that you see depicted. And this is in any order of your choosing when you take this action. This is a new symbol that we see here that nobody else has, as the mob has the dice. This allows you to set a die face to whatever die face you'd prefer it to be. And you may want to do this because when you want to take one of the actions, one of the 4 actions listed under crime, you must place the exact die face depicted. So if I was to place this die face here, I would be taking the patrol action, which allows me to move one of my captains up to 3 spaces away, and just like the police, you can bring grunts with you. Other than that, a lot of the actions that you see depicted are very similar to what we've seen for other characters. So extorting here is how you actually remove these tokens from your board, thereby allowing you to take sweeter actions whenever you run your racket. The cleanup allows you to degrade an influence token and also put out one of your aggression tokens into a tower. This one allows you to set a die as well as put out an aggression token.
And when influence tokens are placed out onto the board, characters such as Grendel, as well as the police, actually gain a benefit for destroying these tokens. All of the characters do, actually, including Argent. And so as an example, whenever Grendel destroys specifically the mob influence tokens, he also gets to punch a grunt in the same space.
And again, even though you roll 4 dice, you're only going to resolve 3 of them per turn. Now, in order to upgrade your actions, just like all the other characters, these are upgradable. You would need to first remove this token, get it out somewhere on the board, and then when you run your racket, this symbol right here allows you to place out one of these tokens covering the pre-existing action here. So patrol gets that much better. In addition to that, you could also upgrade this section here, which is recruiting, by placing out this here. And when you do that, now you have access to these influence tokens that you can deploy onto the board. And that is essentially how the mob works.
And those are all the 4 different characters that you'll see in the game. Now, again, as soon as one of the 3 towers has enough aggression tokens in it so that the backboard here collapses, which let's just quickly demonstrate here.
Okay.
And it's going to be, of course, dependent on player count. There you go.
go.
Then that triggers the Mayhem phase at the end of the active player's turn. And so everything leading up to each Mayhem phase is just considered to be planning for this very moment.
Right.
At the end of that player's turn, we'll start the Mayhem phase by first divvying out all of the aggression tokens that were placed in the tower, because this is the amount of currency you'll be using to spend on actions before you actually score. And so as an example, if it were to look like this, Grendel unfortunately wouldn't have any aggression tokens in that tower, but the police would have 2 aggression,
So
moving up their Mayhem track up by 2. The Argent player would also have 2, and the mob would have 3.
Yep. Just like that. Now, if you are curious, if one of the towers collapses before all players have taken a turn, every single player gets to take a turn before you actually resolve the mayhem.
Now, during the Mayhem phase, starting with the player who triggered the tower, each player is going to be taking turns, spending 3 aggression per turn on taking actions that will primarily allow them to move around the board, punch other players, degrade tokens, and play cards from their hand. So as you can see, having enough aggression to spend during the Mayhem phase is very important. So before players actually start spending Mayhem, each player in turn order can discard up to 2 cards from their hand in order to gain 1 aggression per card. And again, on your turn, if you have 3 or more aggression, you are required to spend 3. If you don't have at least 3, then you have to spend them all. And as soon as you have 0 aggression, that is when your character scores.
Right.
So during the Mayhem phase, each character is going to be scoring at different times, which is very important because the board state is going to constantly change. And of course, we didn't actually play through a planning phase, so the board is not set up the way it would look like during the start of a Mayhem phase.
Sure.
But let's just say, for example, Argent is going to be going first with a total of 2 aggression, and let's just say they have 1 ambush token in space 15, and maybe they are in space 16, like that. Each type of action that you take during the Mayhem phase costs a certain amount of aggression. In order to move around the board, you'll have to spend 1 aggression, and you can use their unique movement abilities. In order to punch, to attack a grunt, it costs 1 aggression, but if you want to attack a captain, it costs 3.
Right.
Because you have to punch a captain 3 times, apparently. In order to degrade a token, it costs 2 aggression. And when playing a card from your hand, each card has a cost in aggression at the top left-hand corner. And so in this example, because Argent only has 2 aggression going into this Mayhem phase, they could choose to play Rend and Tear from their hand if they have it, in order to take all 3 of these actions listed below in any order, which will allow them to degrade a token, move up to 3 spaces, and punch. So with this, they could degrade the police wagon that is in their current space. And again, anytime you destroyed influence token, you get to place out one of your own. They could then move to space 17, that's adjacent. And then they could punch a grunt, which would remove them from the board, placing another influence token of theirs, which again is an ambush token. Now that they've spent all of their aggression, they are immediately required to score for the zone. And the way that scoring works is in each space of the active zone, as long as your scoring condition is true, you score 1 point. So again, the Argent player just wants to have an ambush token in this space. So in this example, the Argent player would score a total of 1, 2, 3 points, moving their token up on the score track. Now, specifically in a 4-player game, if all 4 factions are present in a space, even if their scoring condition is true, no one scores a point for that space.
Right.
So because each character is represented in this space, even though Argent has an ambush token in here, they won't actually get a point for this space. None of them will, actually.
And in lower player counts, if there are 3 factions present, then no one scores there.
And that's essentially it. As soon as your character is finished scoring for the Mayhem phase, you essentially sit out the rest of the phase while all other players continue taking their turns, spending their 3 aggression per turn until it's their turn to score.
Right.
Which means they're probably going to be moving around pieces, potentially removing your pieces in order to make the board look ideal for their scoring objectives. And once all 4 players are finished scoring, then the Mayhem phase ends and you move into the next planning phase, which is played the same way with players taking turns using their own asymmetric turn mechanics. But the difference is now players can no longer place aggression tokens in the towers that have already scored, which means players will resolve 3 Mayhem phases during the entire game. And as soon as you finish resolving the last Mayhem phase, so let's just say the last phase is the Manhattan zone,
Okay.
then you'd score the other 2 zones one last time.
So in that case, you would have scored Brooklyn and Queens twice and Manhattan only once.
That's right, and that's essentially it. At that point, whoever has the most points is the winner and has the most influence over New York for that one night. Now again, that is just a general overview of how each of the 4 characters operate, as well as how the flow of the game sort of works. But the intricate strategies and situations that'll unfold as you play the game really depend on what the players choose to do. And of course, each player has their own deck of cards that have a wide variety of effects that we did not get to go over today. But hopefully you have a good idea as to what to expect from the game. Now again, the game plays 2 to 4 players, and so in lower player counts, each player will still choose a faction, but during setup, the board will also be seeded with the characters that are not in play. They won't be taking turns or moving around the board or anything, but their pieces will still be present for you to punch and manipulate.
Right. Well, there you have it. That is Grendel, an overview of how the 4 different factions play and kind of the game flow. Now, if you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to leave it in the comments down below. We'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. This game is currently on Kickstarter, so if you are interested in the campaign, there's a link in the description, which you can check out. And thank you all so much for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, please consider subscribing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.